Today we have State Representative Ina Minjarez from House District 124 in Texas. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So, what have you heard from your constituents in the aftermath of this law being implemented? This is SB8 out of Texas.
There's great concern. There's panic. I've gotten phone calls from constituents who can't believe that this law wasn't on their radar. They're concerned about the ramifications. They are really having, I think, internal debate about what they're going to do in terms of changing leadership of this state. I think they feel that it is a definite government overreach. So they are asking, how can they get more involved? And, what, if anything, can be done when we come back in the next legislative session in 2 years?
Now, is this any different from, we see these issues constantly that obviously those on the left are vehemently opposed to and yet get implemented anyway because, look, you're in Texas, there's a Republican majority in Texas, there's not much that you can do if you just don't have the numbers. But does this issue, where basically Roe has been gutted, feel different in any way?
It feels different. And what I'm seeing, Brian, is, I have friends or just associates who are Republican, are not involved in politics, right? And they've reached out and they're conservative and they said, Ina, this is an overreach. The fact that I think what's so bothersome to them is there's not an exception for women who are raped or are victims of incest. And they're feeling, that this has gone too far. And that says a lot because they've grown up Republican. This is how they vote, and then they do they are partly pro-life, but they feel this has gone way too far, and they think that this is something that's really concerning. And I think they're looking at things in terms of how did things get so far out of whack in this state. But as a state representative, I've seen it coming. I came into office in 2015, and every legislative cycle, there have been bills that have been filed attacking women's health. For example, there was one filed by Representative Tenderholt. I think he's filed at several sessions where he wanted to charge women with a crime for getting an abortion and charging them with capital murder, where they're looking at the death penalty if they're convicted. And so this is what's happened. This is what's being filed. But I think the public doesn't really pay much attention. But now that this SB8 has become law, and it just on September 1, the media highlighted it and what this law is going to do, and it's caught people's attention.
It really does go to show how far the Overton window has shifted. Like
Sure.
even what we're seeing right now, this would have been no one in their right mind would have just assumed this was going to happen. The bill that you just mentioned, going into law, that does sound crazy, but at the same time, so did this, and yet here we are right now.
That's right. And unfortunately, I think what's happened is there has to be such a negative impact. The fact that this has become law, that it's going to actually touch people, that now the outrage is happening. And sometimes people have to get angry and outraged to make a difference.
Now, I know that you touched upon this a few moments ago, but can you expand on what you've heard from Republicans? Because 70% of all Americans support Roe, including majorities of both political parties. So what are the political implications here? And is it possible beyond that Republicans have just rigged the game so much through gerrymandering and voter suppression that they just assume that there's really no threat of pushback or accountability from this?
That's what I think. I think a lot of the politicians that have benefited from the gerrymandering and from politicking on their red meat issues in order to satisfy their far right rabid base, I think they're going to see that, you've gone too far. You've pushed it way too far, and you've woken up an electorate, right? That's very angry. I'm thinking about, Brian, the Republican moderate woman. I think that they are really going to now start speaking up because I'm hearing from them. There was a representative who didn't get reelected, Sarah Davis, out of the Harris County area, who was Republican, but she was very pro-choice. She was very vocal on that. And I think you're going to probably see maybe women like her or other people that want to get engaged start running for office. And I think there just comes a time where there's a reckoning. If you keep pushing rhetoric and pushing things, and also you're upsetting people where we have real problems in this state. We've had, the pandemic. We have right now, we're the highest rated, I think our state has the highest rate of children dying from COVID. I mean, that's something that's horrible. We had the winter storm with the grid. There's so much need in Texas, and we cannot, the leadership of the state does not want to prioritize those needs. It's about satisfying their base. And we have a governor who's going to be running for president. So he's trying to out Trump possible opponents. And so it's gonna irritate and piss off people. And I think it's going to have an effect on elections. And I think that people are going to start understanding, when you start taking my rights and you get to the point where it's government overreach, we've got to start stepping in.
But hey, at least they passed a law on critical race theory, so
Yeah,
that's what's important here.
that's what's important here.
Yeah. Now, I see the crosses on the wall behind you. A major talking point from the right is that Roe doesn't reconcile with Christianity, and that's the basis for laws like SB8. So, how do you personally reconcile your faith and your politics in this instance?
Well, my mother and father raised me Catholic. I attended, middle school through high school. I attended Catholic school, and I graduated from the University of Notre Dame. But what my mother and my father instilled in me, and the teachings that I learned from the church, is that I have my own personal relationship with God, and He's a forgiving God. And the way that I feel is, I do not feel that I have the right to be having my personal judgments on another human being. I think I can't imagine. I've never been in a situation where I've ever had to decide whether I needed to have an abortion or terminate a pregnancy for one reason or another. I think that is such a personal decision that someone has to make, and with their doctor and with their family and with the God that they pray to. And I just feel that some of these decisions are personal. But for me, I want to have that option. If a woman has to go that route, that she be allowed to, and that it be a safe route to take. And so for me, I believe that my God is a forgiving God. I believe that it is a personal conversation that a woman has to have, again, with her family, her doctor, and her God. And I just don't feel in judging another person, in terms of their personal beliefs.
Well, given that you are Catholic, your voice is especially important in this argument here, because oftentimes we'll feel like the right has a monopoly over religion, over Christianity, and that we don't get to say anything from the left because we just don't understand. But I mean, you right here are a testament to the fact that there are practicing Christians and Catholics on the left as well, and that your voice in this argument matters as well. I feel like the Texas Democrats are constantly on the front line of this battle between national Democrats and the Republicans in your state passing legislation that's just awful, from the voting rights legislation to stuff like this. So what's your message, in the aftermath of that walkout to try to pressure national Democrats into passing the Voting Rights Act? Now we obviously have this serious attack on Roe. What's your message to these national Democrats who basically do have an opportunity to fix all of this if they would be able to eliminate the filibuster and start using their majority to actually pass legislation protecting voting rights and protecting women's reproductive health?
Coming from the state of Texas and always being at the losing end of these battles, you all have a critical role to play federally, nationwide. That's why we broke quorum, because we needed to come and talk to you all about understanding that we are outnumbered in the state of Texas. You all are in the position of so much authority. It's just understanding that you need to be brave and bold, and you need to push for change and be the voices of those state legislatures that don't have one. I come from Texas. My senators, Cohen and Cruz, can care less what I have to say. But you know what? They represent all Texans, and there are Texans screaming for help. And so we hope our federal electeds understand and are taking note of what's happening. and that they are in a position that they can make change, and they need to be bold, and they need to get rid of that filibuster. We elected them, to be at the front lines for us federally, and they are in the position to do so. And I hope that they understand that it all lies with them now, and they got to be the fight.
Now, let's finish off with this. You obviously have a lot of constituents both in your district, and there's, a ton of women and girls all throughout the state who are scared right now. So, what's your message to those women in light of this Supreme Court decision?
I am not going to stop fighting. There are many of us that are continuing to continue fighting, to understand that we are their voices, but we need them as well. We need them to get engaged. We need them to know that their voices matter and to not give up hope, and that they need to push their state and federal elected officials. Let them know how they're feeling, because when the elected officials start hearing from them and understand the passion and understand that they need to be representative of women and girls, that's when I believe that they'll be pushed to understand the impact and the mistake that they've made in pushing a law like this. They got to be vocal.
State Representative Ina Minjarez, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brian.